So I just want to make mention, and we'll be announcing it with a little far out, but August the 31st, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of September will be our gospel meeting. Initially, we was going to see if Mel Futrell could come, and he can, but he can't come all 4 days. So Eli Golson has agreed to start us off on Sunday. Mel will be here Monday and Tuesday, and our good in-house gospel preacher that we have, also Eric Jackson, will be finishing up on Wednesday. So that's the schedule right now. Okay, so anyway, that's a little far out. I just thought I would mention it. So this morning, and we started in Deuteronomy chapter 29, and I'm going to kind of go back and pick up from there, and it has a refresher too for us. So what's going on here in Deuteronomy chapter 29? The conversation looks like this. Exhortation to obedience, the people are all present to enter into his covenant, and wrath on him that flattereth himself in his wickedness. So there are some subjects that Moses is continuing to cover with them. The covenant in the land of Moab is going to be the first part of this section. So let me back up for just a second. So what I'd like to do is chapter 29. Daniel, start with you and just read the first couple of verses, okay?
These are the words of the covenant which the Lord commanded Moses to make with the children of Israel in the land of Moab, besides the covenant which he made with them in Horeb. Now Moses called all Israel and said to them, "You have seen all that the Lord did before your eyes in the land of Egypt, to Pharaoh and to all his servants and to all his land. The great trials which your eyes have seen, the signs and those great wonders, yet the Lord has not given you a heart to perceive and eyes to see and ears to hear. To this very
Okay, that'd be good. That'd be good. Just stop right there. I might have had you go a little bit too far. So here we have Moses charging the children of Israel about the covenant. And if you'll notice, there was a plurality of covenants that he uses here. You had that which was made on Horeb on Mount Sinai, but you also had the blood covenant that was made with them. And that's going to have to be redone in a state as they get ready to go into the promised land. Some 40 years before this, at Mount Sinai, Israel made a covenant with God, Exodus 24:7 through 8. This is a restating and reaffirmation of that covenant. And really, this is what we're going over. You know, basically we call that covenant the Ten Commandments, but it's a whole lot more to it than just that, Jeff, okay, as we have seen, okay? So that was the law of Moses that was given at that time. And that's what he's been doing. He's been restating and reaffirming that covenant, okay? And, okay, besides the covenant which he made at Horeb, for the most part, the people who had the blood of the covenant sprinkled upon them had died in the wilderness. You know, back when they were in Egypt, what were they commanded to do so the death angel would pass over? The blood over their doorpost, okay? So that was a covenant, too, that God had made with them. Now, that was to that older generation. We're going to find, too, that the newer generation is going to have to undergo something similar. Besides the covenant which he made with them at Horeb, for the most part, the people who had the blood of the covenant sprinkled upon them had died in the wilderness. In the generation, this generation of unbelief had died, and the covenant must be renewed with that generation that would enter and conquer Canaan. Okay, so he's talking about, I guess you could say, a blood covenant as well as the law of Moses covenant. Okay, I guess that would be the simplest way to put it. Two through 4, and Daniel just read that Israel saw wonders, but they didn't see them. You know, it's kind of like what we say today sometimes. Sometimes we can't see the forest for the trees. The forest is there, but we can't see it because we're too busy looking at the trees, Daniel. Okay? So making the connection, if you will, between the trees and the forest, okay? They couldn't quite make the connection in their heart and in their mind, Eric, but the connection that was there. They saw these wonders, they saw these signs, and Moses told them that God had done all these signs in verse 2, before your eyes in the land of Egypt unto Pharaoh and to his servants. Now you got to remember that those above 20 years of age and older had died in the wilderness. Now you've got some here that no doubt were young kids or teenagers at the time those events took place in Egypt. So there were those there that has young kids. They should remember some of these events that transpired. So 40 years later, let's say they were, some of them were 14 or 15 years old, that would make this group intermingle with it those that were 54, 55 years old, right? So this is what he's talking about. You should be able to remember this. And so he's re-illustrating to them those events and how God had led them out. But notice what else he says. He says, yet the Lord hath not given you a heart to perceive, and eyes to see, ears to hear, unto this day. Said, you've seen all these events, and you know all these things, and when you look back at the older generation, how many were allowed to enter into the promised land? Well, Joshua and Caleb, when you look at the age status, okay? So they were allowed to enter in the promised land after that old group. And yet, why would it be so few, Daniel, that would enter in? They could see, but they couldn't believe. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. And so that's why, we're more blessed today, Jesus said, than they were, because to have it not seen, we believe. Okay? I haven't seen any of those things physically, Greg. So how do I see them today? Spiritually. Okay? Spiritually, I can see those things, and in my mind, I can paint a visual picture of those things. This is not something that was a foreign thought. Moses used it here, and I'm not going to turn over to Isaiah, used it. Even the Apostle Paul used it before his death in Acts chapter 28 when he was talking to the people there that he was under house arrest. And so, in Acts chapter 28, beginning at verse 25, well spake the Holy Ghost by Isaiah the prophet unto your fathers, saying, go unto this people and say, hearing you shall hear, and shall not understand. Hearing you shall hear, and you shall not understand. Seeing you shall see, and not perceive. Well, even today, a lot of times, and we're looking at this more from a spiritual side than we are a physical side. But many today hear, but they can't understand what they're hearing, can they? They see, but they can't believe what they're seeing. So what causes that? What caused that within Israel of old and throughout Israelite history, and even with people today? Well, verse 27 explains what is going on. For the heart of this people is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and should be converted, and I should heal them. The reason, and in the Apostle Paul's day, we're talking about the gospel era, the gospel age, repentance, confession, and baptism. Back then, we were talking about belief in the heart and things of that nature. It's still the same principle. Well, you've heard the gospel message. You've seen the impact of the gospel. You have seen those obey the gospel and were baptized for the remission of sin. And guess what? You still don't believe it. True today, isn't it? It's true today. Because there's so many things, and it's not uncommon. A lot of times we think about today that we have a lot of things that distract people. Well, that's been throughout the ages. I mean, they had distractions, didn't they? No, they didn't have television. They didn't have the NFL. They didn't have NASCAR. They didn't have the boat at the lake. But what did they have? Idolatrous practices, okay? Now, I don't want to get too deep off in that subject because years ago we done a lesson about modern day idolatry. No, it may not be the statue of Buddha. It may not be a golden calf. It may not be the Babylonian garments or the talent of silver that Achan took after they crossed over into the promised land, so on and so forth. But it can be anything that stands between you and God. I mean, pick it. Maybe it's the desire and the want of a home, and we go out and we do everything we can to forsake the Lord for the status of a home somewhere. Or maybe it is a boat. Now, maybe whatever it could be. The point is, if it stands between you and God, then it's an idol. Okay? So the question becomes, Eric, is idolatry alive and well today? Oh, yeah, it's alive and well. It hadn't went anywhere. All the shapes of the statutes, if you will, have changed, but it's still the same principle. So even the Apostle Paul about AD 60 or so used that same thought pattern that Moses had used about 1,511 years earlier. So the heart and minds of people have not changed. And so we find that they seen those things and yet still had a problem believing. Any of you brethren got a comment you want to make on that? The miracle in and of themselves did not accomplish anything in the heart. Have you noticed how many times that even in the Old Testament we refer back to what? The heart. Has God always dealt with the heart? You remember when all this first started, what did God tell them about, that I'm going to use the giving of the goods to build the tabernacle? What did God tell them right off the bat about their giving of the gold and silver and the linen and all those things? What did he tell them? From the heart, I want you to do these things. So the heart has played an important role throughout the history of old Israel. Does the heart today play an important role in the history of spiritual Israel? That's what we battle for, Reed, is the hearts and minds of men and women. And when we say that, what are we talking about there? We're talking about the heart. We're not talking about the blood pump. We're talking about the uttermost, and uttermost simply means the very depth. You can't go any deeper than uttermost, okay? Deep as you can go, right? The uttermost seat of the affections is the heart that we're talking about today. What about back then? Are we talking about the blood pump? Are we talking about the uttermost seat of their affections? Where did their heart lie? Well, as we find with a lot of them, it never lied with God, did it? Never laid with God? Okay. One of them. I had to figure it out later. Okay. So the heart is very important. They needed the enlightenment that Yahweh could give them, but which by reason of their disobedience he had not given them. Such blindness on the part of those who reject God's revelation is not uncommon. Men may hear but not understand because of the hardness of their hearts. And, you know, that's kind of on the deep inside of it, the far end of it, but a lot of times that's what it is. People just don't want to do it. They know to do it. They know they should do it. They know the consequences of not doing it. They just choose not to do it. Remember, Israel had a choice in this matter. Okay? So if they rejected the miracles of God, well, God allowed their heart to be what? Hardened, didn't he? Okay? Because one of the things you have to remember in all this, if God had forced his will upon them, they no longer would have been what? Free moral agents. Okay? So that's one of the things to remember as we look at this. So, Isaiah 6, 8 through 10, and we just talked about that from Acts 28, but anyway, go and tell this people, hear you indeed, but will not understand. See you indeed, but will not perceive. For the heart of this people is dull, and their ears are heavy, and their eyes are shut. Lest they see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and be turned, and be healed. So here you have Isaiah the prophet somewhere around, oh wow, 800 years later, saying what Moses had quoted in 1451 BC. It's kind of interesting. The theme follows through from generation to generation, from people to people, from nation to nation. And even in Paul's day, on this side of the cross, in the gospel era, what is still being taught? So the heart and mind of God here again has not changed in principle, has it? It's changed in the way the application is from physical to spiritual, but the same thought pattern applies even today. And we just read Acts 28, 25 through 28, so probably got a little bit ahead of ourselves. That's okay. God's great works for Israel in the wilderness. Jeff, do you have that? That'll be verses 5 through 9.
I have led for 40 years in the wilderness. Your clothes have not worn out on you, and your sandals have not worn off your feet. You have not eaten bread, and you have not drunk wine or strong drink, that you may know that I am the Lord your God. But when you come to this place, Shiloh, the king of Heshbon, and Og, the king of Bashan, come out against us, to battle, and we defeated them. We took their land and gave it as an inheritance to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half tribe of the Manasseh. Therefore, keep your words of this covenant and do them, and you may prosper in all that you do.
Isn't it amazing at what it says here? He led them 40 years in the wilderness, and notice one of the things that didn't happen. Your clothes are not waxing old, and your shoes are not waxing upon your feet. You know, wearing the same clothes, and I'm sure they had changed raiment, having the same clothes over and over again, and it don't wear out. What's the probability of that after 40 years? And not very good. I mean, you know, by today's standards, you can buy an expensive pair of blue jeans, and if you take good care of them and don't beat them up too much, you might get a couple, 3 years or so out of them, you know. But that's the life of it, you know. So that right there, that right there should have been enough to do what? Hey, wait a minute, there's something going on here, you know. That's just like, you know, what the centurion or the soldier there at the cross, when he saw Jesus and the events that transpired there, you know, what did he say? Surely. And the way it should read there is, surely this must have been a son of God, or the son of a God. So even he was able to recognize, wait a minute, something going on here. You know, all these events that happen, something is, hey, listen. And I don't know if you've ever went farther in your study on it. It's just kind of interesting sometimes to get a hold of something, you read it about what happened to that soldier, and it is thought historically that later on he converted, okay? But that is not in the Bible. That's over here, okay? Like a lot of things, that would be over in the annals of man study or history or whatever you want to call it, but that's not in the Bible. I just want to clarify that. So, but anyway, he did know something was going on there, right? I mean, just think about it. Your clothes didn't rot, your shoes didn't rot, you got to eat. God made you a healthy people. He had you abstain from certain things to eat and not eat. That should have been enough, but not. Daniel?
But it also says, I mean, what you're saying, he didn't give him wine, he gave him fresh water the whole time.
Yeah. I mean, and the reason for that was to be a healthy people. If you go back and think, somewhere before Mount Sinai, right along there, you remember that diet, and I can't remember exactly what it was, the way that was set up. We had talked about it. The way it was set up was to cleanse and purge out the old of Egypt. I mean, the foods and things that they eat in Egypt, the contamination that was in the blood, in the stomach, all that was done was to purge, to make them healthy, you know? Because God wanted a healthy people, and, you know, Jeff, if you're going to wander in the desert for 40 years, you better have a little substance to you, hadn't you? You won't last 40 years, will you? So, but yes, that's right. So he wanted them to be a healthy people. You sure did. Anybody else got any comments they want to make on that? Any of your brethren? The best situation possible for the people was to commit to the Lord his God. No higher, more satisfactory state was conceivable than that of obedient Israel under the covenant treaty with the Lord. So that should have been the height of their satisfaction. Plainly, these were remarkable miracles. Clothing, sandals simply do not last 40 years of hard marching in the wilderness apart from a miracle. The wilderness does not provide enough food and water to meet the needs of some 2 million people apart from a miracle. A nation of slaves for 400 years, well, we know that that's often said, but in reality what that means is the first couple of hundred years, they lived within the land of Goshen and they prospered. Then there arose a Pharaoh that knew not Joseph, and so for 200 years you could say they were in formal bondage, okay? But they were down in the land for about 400 years, and Paul clears that up, and we went through that back many lessons ago, so we did a great study on that. A nation of slaves for 400 years did not conquer standing kingdoms and take the land apart from a miracle. One of the things you notice about this, so far you haven't seen a manufacture of weapons, have you? We know they had staves, and no doubt they had swords, because that's how they lived and had to prepare and protect themselves from wild animals and all. But where's the manufacture of the arsenal? It was God, wasn't it? Just think about that. Now, we know they had to go in and take these lands and stuff, like what they did with Og and Gog, and what was the name of the other? Og, the king of Bashan, and Sihon, the king of Heshbon, and we talked about that, about they didn't go in and try to take the land of Edom or Moab because God still considered that an extension of his people. But when we look north on the map, and we got up north in there where Manasseh and Gad and Reuben settled, they went in there and took those lands. And we talked about King Og, wasn't it? That was his bed was like 14 foot long and 8 foot wide, and he was like 13 foot tall and all like that. So he was a big guy, okay? And we talked about that. So anyway, God provided what they needed for whatever the conquest to be. God provided it, okay? But nowhere do we see a manufacturing plant of arms being moved with them do. Kind of interesting, isn't it? When we get over into this, one of the way God is going to defeat some of the Canaanites is how? Before Israel goes down to fight them, he's going to send the hornet in. Now, Greg, I don't know, but I imagine there was a lot of running going on when them hornets went in down there, okay? Can you imagine being in a barracks or a tent and a nest of hornets get loose on you? What about being in a tank, somebody drop a hornet's nest over in there? What you going to do? So there are ways to do things, just like the parting of the Red Sea and things like that, isn't it? Okay? So God is going to use some things as an aid. Covenant renewal. 10 through 15, the parties to the covenant. Reed, do you have that 10 through 15?
You stand today, all of you, before the Lord your God, your chiefs, your tribes, your elders, and your officers, even all the men of Israel, your little ones, your wives, and the alien who is within your camps, the one who chops your wood, the one who draws the water. You may enter into the covenant with the Lord your God, according to his oath which the Lord your God is making with you today, in order that he may establish you today as his people, and that he may be your God, just as he spoke to you, and as he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now not with you alone am I making this covenant and this oath, but both with those who stand here with us today in the presence of the Lord our God, and with those who are not with us here today.
Okay, so here we have God talking about this covenant renewal. He talks about that it was established for thee today, for the people, and to thyselves. And also he talked about who all would be under that covenant. Let's back up a verse. He said, you shall stand this day, all you, before the Lord your God, your captains of the tribes, with your elders, your officers, with all the men, your little ones, your wives, thy stranger that is in thy camp, from the hewer of thy wood to the drawer of thy water, thou shouldest enter into the covenant of the Lord. So it was for all those contained within Israel, wasn't it? You know what's kind of been fascinating about this study? I knew the stranger was an important element within Israel, but have you noticed how many times even the strangers that dwelt within them would be blessed? Now, you can kind of look at that on a modern scale. You know, you've been in the church for a while, most of us have, and I've been in the church for a while, and we know there's people that would be in the church, they would come and be more faithful sometimes than the regular members, but they would never obey the gospel or whatever. But the blessings of God is still on them, isn't it? You know, they're hoping that to be drawn into the family of God. We know that we've seen people where one spouse is a faithful member and the other spouse maybe hadn't obeyed the gospel or is weak in the gospel, and they be faithful members, and that household is blessed, isn't it? You know, it all boils down to a principle, Reed. What does it say? The writer of Proverbs said, righteousness does what to a nation? Exalts it, doesn't it? Doing the principles of right. And I didn't say you'd obeyed the gospel. I didn't say you had obeyed the animal sacrifices yet, okay? The principles of righteousness. But sin, it doesn't matter who you are, is a reproach unto any people. So there's a principle laid down in all this, okay? Even the stranger among them would be blessed, okay? So anyway, it's kind of a deep thought, but if you notice when you get over into Acts 2, who all was there among those 17 or 18 different nations that were present there? Who also came? Were there those that were of a non-Jewish state present there? Yes, there was. They had accepted Judaism. They're called proselytes. Okay? So there were proselytes among the Jewish people. Probably wasn't a lot, but there were proselytes, okay, that had accepted the Jewish faith. So, anyway. All of Israel was included in God's desire to enter into the covenant, to be the people for himself. He wasn't just looking for a few prominent and talented people or for just one spiritual tribe like the Levites. God wanted the whole nation to be his people for himself. Is that still true today? Yeah. He's not looking, he's really not looking for one to stand out and be the overall leader. He wants all the people in the nation of Israel to be a standout, if you will, okay? To be a part of that body. This was a national covenant Israel made with God. The nation of Israel was largely defined by ethnicity, being the genetic descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It was not exclusively defined by ethnicity. Foreigners were allowed to forsake all their pagan gods and to surrender to the covenant and the law of Israel, but it was mainly defined by ethnicity or by the Jews. Kind of interesting when you take a look at that. They were allowed to forsake their pagan gods and surrender to the covenant of the law of Israel. Today, the strangers among us, if there be any that's dwelling among us, and there are congregations that have the strangers among them, Greg, if you will, by using that terminology, are they allowed to come in and be a part of the covenant of God if they obey the gospel? Yeah. So what was the requirement for these people? Well, what they had to do, they had to forsake. The word forsaken means to turn your back on. Brother Claude Flynn, many years ago, of course, he's been long passed away, used to run some gospel meetings here for us. And I wish I could speak like he did. He had a Dutch Rhodesian accent because his family was from Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, okay? And they had to escape because of the turmoil that was going on there, and he was one of the few that got out. Okay, but anyway, he would talk about this word forsake. He said, you know what forsake means? And I can remember him standing up there with that Dutch Rhodesian accent and say, he said, I went into an orphanage one time, and he said there was this little girl standing there, and the curator and I were talking, and he said she had the very saddest, brown, darkest, coldest unlivable eyes. And he said, he asked the curator, he said, what's wrong with this child? And the curator looked at him and said, she has been forsaken. It means to turn your back on. It means to withhold. Now, when you look at it from that standpoint of view, which a lot of times we talk about not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, when you look at it and you think about what Brother Claude Flynn said that he saw there in that orphanage, kind of puts a different spin on it, don't it? To forsake, to turn one's back upon. She had nobody. You know, it's a powerful thought. I mean, you know, and all on that. So, but they had to do what to their idols? They had to turn their back on it, didn't they? To walk away, to leave. Okay. So anyway, any of you brethren got any comments on that? The promise of judgment against the covenant breakers, verses 16 through 20. Ryan, do you have verses 16 through 20?
You know how we lived in the land of Egypt, and how we came through the midst of the nations through which you passed. And you have seen their detestable things, their idols of wood and stone, and of silver and gold, which were among them. Beware lest there be among you a man or woman or clan or tribe, whose heart is turning away from the Lord your God to go and serve the gods of those nations. Beware lest there be among you a root bearing poisonous and bitter fruit, one who, when he hears the words of this sworn covenant, blesses himself in his heart, saying, I shall be safe, though I walk in the stubbornness of my heart. This will lead to the sweeping away of the moist and dry alike. The Lord will not be willing to forgive him, but rather the anger of the Lord and his jealousy will smoke against that man, and the curses written in this book will settle upon him, and the Lord will blot out his name from under heaven.
Okay, so here we have a curse being pronounced upon them. You know, one of the great dangers is if we're not careful, is one, you know, being deceived, and we know people are deceived every day. They are swindled out of their goods, aren't they? Okay? And we know what that is. There's religious people that will swindle you out of your soul's salvation. But there may be one that's even worse than that. Lying to ourselves in our own self-conceit and self-deceit, thinking we're above whatever that we are measuring ourselves against. And that's bad. The Apostle Paul in the church at Galatia, he called that, why have some bewitched you? That's a form of witchcraft. Okay? And I don't know that we stop and think about that, but being caught up in one's own self-deceit, that's a pretty tough thing, you know? And I'm afraid that's what happens a lot of times when people resist the gospel. Of course, they make a choice and they're caught up in things, but a lot of times it's a matter of self, isn't it? I don't want to do that, but self, you know? It's all about self. And so he's pronounced as a cursing here among them about walking in your own heart and your own mind, walking in your own peace. Well, what that is self-deception, you know? That's like what the Apostle Paul said to the church at Thessalonica, when they promise you peace and safety, then come at the end. Which you can get yourself in a state of mind that everything's all right, I'm all right, this is not going to come upon me, that's for somebody else, and, you know, well, you better watch out. You're probably headed for a big fall, okay, if you take a look at it. So, and he warned about that, but I want you to notice something here. We've heard the term, and it's preached on a lot, about our names being blotted out in the book of life, right? Is that a new thought? It's an old thought. Moses even referred to it here. Notice what he told them about their name being blotted out. The Lord will not spare him, but the anger of the Lord and his jealousy shall smoke against him, and all the curses that are written in this book shall lie upon him, and the Lord shall blot out his name from under heaven. Now, what book could he have been talking about here, their name being blotted out of? Well, the New Testament hadn't come yet, has it? So what Paul in the book of Revelation says, and the books were opened, talking about the names that were written under the keeping of the old law and the names that's written under the new law. So has the principle, has the thought pattern changed there again, Eric? It's kind of amazing, isn't it? You know? At how God sought to bring about the reconciliation of Jew and Gentile. So he told them, you can have your name blotted out. Okay? So man's foolish heart reasons. He hears the curse pronounced against sin. He knows that the man who turns from God is threatened with gall and wormwood, and yet he persists in his evil ways, secretly blessing himself and laying the flattering unction to his heart that he would at least come off scot-free. That's self-deception, isn't it? That's dangerous. The other's dangerous, that's even more dangerous. For those in Christ and under the new covenant, Jesus Christ is in their place as the one whom the Lord would not spare. He was substituted, dying in the place of guilty sinners. 2 Corinthians 5, verse 21. 21 through 28. Greg, do you have that?
Then the Lord will single him out for having persecuted from all of the tribes of Israel, according to all the curses of the covenant which are written in this book of the law. As a generation to come, your sons who rise up after you, and the foreigner who comes from a distant land, when they see the plagues of the land and the diseases with which the Lord has afflicted it, will say, all this land is brimstone and salt, a burning waste, unsown and unproductive, and no grass grows in it, like the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah and Zipporah, which the Lord overthrew in anger and in his wrath. All the nations will say, why has the Lord done this to this land? Why this great outburst of anger? Then men will say, because they forsook the covenant of the Lord, the God of their fathers, which he made with them when he brought them out of the land of Egypt. They went and served other gods and worshipped them, gods whom they had not known and whom he had not allotted to them. Therefore the anger of the Lord burned against the land to bring upon it every curse which is written in this book. And the Lord uprooted them from their land in anger and in fury and in great wrath, and cast them into another land as it is this day.
Okay. All right. So here we have here. Notice what it says here in verse 21. I'm gonna ask you to think about this for just a minute. And the Lord shall separate him unto evil out of all the tribes of Israel, according to all the curses of the covenant that are written in the book of the law. Separate him out. Going to be divided out. The one that's not obeying the law is going to do what? Be cast aside. It. Can you see a shadow of Matthew 25 coming into this? Notice what Jesus said over there in Matthew chapter 25 about the separation. It says here, and when the Son of Man shall come in his glory, Matthew 25:31, and the holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory, and he shall set all nations among him, and he shall do what? Separate one from another. And he shall set the sheep on his right hand and the goats on the left. Are we starting to see a shadow within some of this of a future judgment too? Not only are you going to be physically separated from Israel, a flesh and blood separation, but what else is going to wait? If your name is blotted out of the book, which side of the fence you fall on there? Goats or sheep? Okay? So here again, sometimes in this, and maybe I hadn't done maybe a good enough job on going to the future with a lot of this, but in a lot of this you can see within this prophecy, not only was it for that day, but most of the time prophecy is twofold. It's looking to the future of Jesus Christ. Okay? And so we see that here, and I got 2 minutes. And I think we went through that. Verse 29, God's revelation to Israel. The secret things belong unto the Lord our God. But these things which are revealed belong unto us and to our children forever, that we may do all the words of the law. So the secret things, they belong unto God. Okay? There are things today that still belong unto God. But has the word been revealed, His will, His way, His knowledge, has the word been revealed, the expectations to us today? Yes. Was it revealed unto them yesterday? Yes. So it's the same thought pattern there again, Eric. They had the word, didn't they? They had it written in stone, didn't they? They had the scribes. They had the priest. Was the word available? Yeah. What was their choice? Well, it's like today. They had to make a choice. And I got to ring that buzzer. The secret things belong to the Lord our God, but those things which are revealed belong to us and our children, that we may do all the words of the law. Can we apply that twofold? What law? Well, the old law, to them. That's who he's talking to. He's talking to the Jewish people. Well, let's take an application of that today. Can we do the words of the law that we're under today? Yeah. So what is really the difference here, Greg? Spiritual versus physical, physical versus spiritual. Okay? The thought pattern, and I have to keep illustrating that, the thought pattern, the principle, here again, it's not changed, has it? It's still intact. And that is the end.